The radiator in the Queen's studio coughed like a smoker and then fell silent, as if it too had reached the limit of what it could afford. Steam curled past the single-pane window and smudged the view of Roosevelt Avenue. Neon bodega signs reflected in a film of winter condensation. Ethan Cole hunched at the Craigslist desk, a hoodie hood pulled over his ears, editing yet another block of code that paid $60 an hour if the client remembered to pay. On the stove, a pot of instant ramen breathed in small, shy bubbles, the odor of dehydrated MSG feeling like a brochure for almosts. Olivia stood near the door, bag on shoulder, scarf looped twice at her throat. She'd been quiet too long, the way a room is quiet just before a glass slides off the edge. "You forgot the Con Ed bill," she said evenly. "Again." Ethan kept his hands on the keyboard, as if any movement risked breaking the fragile thing that held his life together. "I didn't forget. I can't pay it till Friday. The city pilot responses do live. If ArcPath nails this, we have runway." "We," Olivia repeated softly, like a word she was testing for sharp edges. "Ethan, runway is a word men on podcasts use to keep women waiting." He looked up. She had that expression he hated. Not anger, not yet, but a kind of compressed worry that made him want to fix everything in a single gesture. He wanted to be a gesture. He wanted to be the man who could toss a credit card on a bar and not feel his heart twitch. Instead, he was a man whose hands shook when he checked his balance. "It's a month," he said. "2, tops. The model's working. Once we prove the last mile emission cuts, we'll get the micro grants, and then the seed round, and then the Series A, and then your life begins," she said, and he heard her force a smile. "Meanwhile, I'm eating dinner at 10 p.m. after my shift, because you forgot groceries. Again." He stood, the chair legs scarring the floor. "I'll go now. It's not about the kale, Ethan." Her voice thinned. "It's about the story I keep telling my parents, about how the boy I love is brilliant and brave and one lucky break away, and how I'm not a fool for believing in him, and how any day now." He crossed to her, the apartment shrinking to a corridor of apologies. He smelled snow on her scarf and the not quite extinguished perfume of a showroom she'd staged that afternoon in Tribeca, where windows were more a concept than a need. Olivia worked for a boutique real estate firm. She had a gift for making emptiness look intentional. He'd once told her that. She had laughed, then frowned, as if it were prophecy. "I know what you tell them," he said, "and I know what they think of me." She bit her lip, embarrassed by the truth of it. "They think you're nice and talented and unserious about the realities of adulthood." "I'm building something real." Ethan's chest warmed with the old stubbornness. "I'm not playing founder dress-up. This isn't drop shipping. City logistics are a mess. If we can route lighter and faster, corner stores won't spend half their margins on delivery. That matters." "It does," she said, and for a moment he saw the girl who'd watched him sketch optimization diagrams on pizza boxes, the one who took the Q train with him at midnight just to keep him company. That girl stepped forward to wrap her arms around him. "But love can't live on mattering. It needs shelter. It needs heat." As if summoned, the radiator hiccuped and died again. They both laughed, a weak, shared human noise. "Give me time," he whispered into her hair. "Give me us." Olivia pulled back. A hesitation passed across her face, a mercury bead trembling before it slides. "Do you remember last week," she said, "when I asked if you could come to my coworker's birthday and you said you had to fix production bugs? And then I saw on your Instagram stories that you were up until 3 a.m. with the guys at that Williamsburg warehouse sipping whiskey and whiteboarding?" "I was networking," he said, too fast. Her smile this time was clean and tired. "You were choosing a version of you that doesn't need anyone. Maybe that's the man you have to be. But I'm tired of auditioning for the cut of your future. The pot on the stove hissed. A noodle strand surrendered to the boil with the sound of something small breaking. She reached for the doorknob. I don't want to fight. Ethan, I can't be poor forever. Not just money poor, hope poor. She swallowed, and the word that would become the tattoo on his memory emerged, plain and merciless. I'm leaving. He felt the sentence in his knees. Because I'm, what, too poor? Her eyes filled and then steadied. Because what we call love has become faith in a God who never answers. He wanted to tell her faith answers in other languages, in the patience to debug a system until dawn, in the monkish satisfaction of a working test suite, in the map of a city changing because of lines he wrote. He wanted to tell her that poverty was a season, not a sentence, that shame was weather that sometimes felt like climate. He wanted to say all of it and also nothing at all. Is there someone else, Dim? He asked, because pride is a reflex before it is a sin. No, she said, and then softer, as if asking forgiveness from a future self. Not yet. The door closed behind her. The apartment expanded in a rush, then shrank to fit the outline she left in the air. Ethan turned off the stove. He set the pot on a cold burner and watched the broth settle into a dull surface that reflected the ceiling light like a coin you couldn't reach. He opened his laptop. The City Pilot RFP pinned to his screen was a thicket of requirements, a bureaucratic forest that promised a clearing somewhere past page 42. He began to type, but the words slid off the keys. He thought of Olivia at the 74th Street station, the hum of trains stitching her to somewhere that used to include him. On the desk, his phone buzzed, an alert from a productivity app no one used anymore. You're almost at your daily goal. Keep going. He laughed, a single hard exhale. Then he put the phone face down and wrote until the radiator coughed again, until the blocks of text began to cohere, until the grammar of ambition reclaimed him. At 3 a.m., he stepped out onto the fire escape. The city breathed below him, late buses exhaling, a couple arguing softly in Spanish, sirens dopplering into the chastened distance. Snow began as if the sky had remembered to be gentle. Ethan held the cold rail and made a promise he didn't say out loud, not to win her back, not to humiliate the people who said he wasn't enough, but simply to become someone he wouldn't leave. Years later, when a journalist asked about the moment everything changed, he would talk about algorithms and municipal partnerships, venture checks, and enterprise contracts. He would never mention the radiator, the ramen, or the girl with a scarf like a private season, carrying her sadness down the stairs. He went back inside and sent the proposal. Then he washed the pot, set it upside down to dry, and lay on the futon with his hands behind his head, staring at the cracked paint. He didn't cry. He listened to the city count for him. He waited for morning to come like an email. In another borough, and in another version of the same story, Olivia sat on a friend's couch and scrolled through her phone. The algorithm served her Ethan's profile. 3 photos down, a grainy shot of a whiteboard. Pilot due. Pray for me, Internet. She closed her eyes, the room quiet around her, and discovered that endings make their own radiators. They clank, they cool, they leave. Her tears came, soft and surprised, as if they were remembering something she had forgotten to feel. Tomorrow, she whispered to no one, I will be braver than this. But for one night, 2 people in a city of 8 million kept the same time. By the time the city thawed into a shy spring, Ethan had learned to speak 2 dialects fluently, the grammar of roots and the grammar of rooms. By day, he tuned ArcPath's algorithms until the numbers sang, kilograms of CO2 shaved, driver miles saved, Minutes returned to bodegas that survived on margins thinner than receipts. By night, he practiced the etiquette of polished glass, investor cocktails in towers that held sunsets captive, panels where he learned to pause after a joke, to make the line about Queen's self-deprecating but not tragic, to wear a jacket that suggested he had a tailor without naming him. ArcPath's first pilot, 5 micro warehouses stitched into a lattice from Red Hook to Washington Heights, turned out to be a small miracle that looked like math. Delivery vans shrank, e-bikes multiplied, and corner stores began to get cinnamon and cilantro on time. The city's sustainability office posted a spreadsheet no one read except those who could hear music in cells. Ethan heard it. He took a screenshot, drew circles around the columns, and fed the numbers to a reporter who wanted a story about grit. She titled it, "The Algorithm That Remembers the Corner Store." And suddenly, investors with declarative names, Pioneer, Anchor, North Star, asked for coffee that wasn't coffee. A year became 3. The Queen studio gave way to a 1-bedroom in a Long Island City building where the lobby smelled faintly of grapefruit and shoe polish. The elevator had a mirror that returned him a version of himself he was still meeting, jaw set, collar right, the kind of fatigue that can afford a weekend without using it. He never quite got used to being recognized at DevOps meetups, or to hearing his own name spoken by people who were old enough to analyze it. But he got used to paying the Con Ed bill automatically. Founders therapy at 4, Meg would say over Slack, meaning an investor check-in with euphemisms. Meg had joined ArcPath when it was still a folder on a desktop. She had a buzz cut, a dry wit, and a compulsion to use the word systems in contexts that made it seem tender. And the Times wants a quote on municipal e-bike lanes. "Tell them lanes are just policy shaped like mercy," Ethan typed back, then deleted the sentence because it sounded like a man who wanted to be quoted. At the end of long days, he rode the G to Greenpoint and ran the waterfront. The skyline at dusk was all sharp promises. The river kept them at a distance. He passed couples taking engagement photos, browsed a thrift store that sold nostalgia by the pound, and bought dumplings from a place whose name he never learned. He dated, cautiously. Women with loud earrings and quiet eyes, women with startup fatigue, and teachers who graded papers at bars. He never lied about the hours, or about the way his phone became an altar when a deal was close. They didn't lie about the way his attention felt like weather. The endings were small and kind. On LinkedIn, his life acquired a parade of milestones. Series A closed, Brooklyn warehouse ribbon cutting, speaking at a climate summit where a senator nodded gravely as if gravity were a choice. He learned the choreography of panels. Lean forward, repeat the question, say the thing your comms person would underline in the transcript. He also learned to ignore comments that said he was a grifter or a saint, 2 forms of not seeing. In a colonial near Stanford that practiced the art of looking old without having earned it, Olivia learned new dialects too. She learned how to talk about backsplash tile as if it were a moral position, and how to glide through charity brunches where the centerpieces had bigger personalities than most conversations. She married Mark Ellison in a ceremony that made Instagram bloom. His smile was proof of something. She wasn't sure what. Mark worked in strategic partnerships for a conglomerate that supplied grocery chains. He wore his competence like a well-fitted shirt. He knew where to stand in group photos and when to leave them. On Sunday evenings, they performed a ritual that held their lives together like safety pins, planning the week. Mark opened a shared Google Calendar and narrated it aloud. His dinners with clients, her showings, the PTA fundraiser, the Pilates class she kept moving and moving until it fell off the edge. "We're a team," he would say, touching her wrist. "We just need the cadence." "What if I want a melody?" she said once, and he smiled like she'd made a sweet joke. Her friends called her lucky. Generous mentions of her well-kept life made her feel like a garden that belonged to a house. She kept up with the city the way you keep up with an ex, in curated doses, through friends' texts and algorithmic proximity. It seemed to follow her no matter how she looked away. She would open Instagram to save a banana bread recipe, and there he was, Ethan, in a hard hat, laughing with a woman from the bodega on 125th. The caption, tasting of earnest press releases. The comments, a familiar riot. She would scroll past quickly, then go back, then set the phone down as if it were hot. Mark watched her sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking, and occasionally his gaze had an evaluative sheen, like a home inspection. But he was decent in the ways that show up on paper. He remembered the names of her clients, brought orchids home without occasion, forwarded her podcasts about decision fatigue with a note. This is us, LOL. Decency, Olivia discovered, can be a subtle trap. It makes it hard to find words for lack. When she met his colleagues, men who wore empathy as a lanyard, and women who sharpened their intelligence until it felt like geometry, someone would inevitably bring up ArcPath. The sector buzzed with acronyms and audits. Smart move going modular, a VP would say, but their labor model is vulnerable to union pressure. Another would nod. Rumor is they're over-indexed on ESG narratives, unsustainable without subsidies. Olivia would sip her spritz and keep her face still. Later, she would Google in the quiet of a pantry and read both praise and contempt, neither of which helped. One evening, while folding laundry into obedient stacks, she watched a clip of Ethan on a local news segment. The camera loved him, in the way cameras love people who forget to court them. He spoke with a technical patience that made terms like load balancing sound like kindness. The reporter asked what success meant. He looked past the camera toward some point of middle distance and said that the people who bet on us, workers, shop owners, the city, don't feel foolish. He didn't say her name, which made the sentence safer and crueler. Olivia blinked as if caught in bright weather. Tears came without ceremony. She pressed a towel to her face like a nurse with no patient. Mark came in carrying a bottle of Chilean red and 2 movie options posing as compromises. "You good?" he asked, pausing in the doorway like a man checking a thermostat. "Just tired," she said. "Long day at the office." Meaning, a couple arguing in whispers about whether a powder room could redeem a school district, a colleague crying in the bathroom quietly, a sink that wouldn't drain, and the plumber who said it wasn't the sink's fault. "Let's book Napa in the spring," he said. "We never do anything spontaneous unless we plan it." She smiled, the kind of smile you put on a calendar. In the city, ArcPath moved to a floor in a building in Tribeca that used to warehouse silk and now warehoused semantics, innovation, impact, any word that made money look like virtue. The office had large plants that were not succulents and a kitchen island big enough to be mistaken for Swiss neutrality. The team grew. Dispatchers who knew every avenue's weather, engineers who named servers after literary nonconformists, an ops lead who could stare at a map and see a heartbeat. They worked the way good teams work. Loud, loyal, half in jokes and half in deadlines. "Photo at 11, Meg said one morning. "You're in a profile about urban entrepreneurs who still ride the subway." "I do still ride the subway," Ethan said. "Yes," she said, "we're honoring the truth by curating it." The photographer asked him to look out the window like he just had a thought that could become a company. He obliged and tried to think of something honest. A delivery biker whose chain broke in rain. A kid in the Bronx who sent in a science fair pain chart comparing bus routes pre- and post-ArcPath microhubs. A note taped to a bodega register. Gracias for the early bread. He didn't think of Olivia. Not usually. Or he told himself not usually. At the gala that would become a hinge, an invitation arrived embossed with a charity's logo that looked like a chandelier. Ethan set it aside until Meg circled it in red on his Google Calendar. "Your keynote," she said. "You do the speech, you shake hands, you leave. Try not to confess to anything true." "Copy," he said. And the RSVP went out into the city's bloodstream where everything eventually meets everything else. On the morning of his talk, he waited for the elevator, hearing the building breathe. He remembered the radiator in Queens and the way its cough had punctuated silence. The elevator doors opened to glass and light, a city arranged like a chessboard that forgave winners. He adjusted his collar and entered the room where the people who liked to be seen had gathered to watch each other. He nodded at men who owned air and women who governed calendars. On a balcony, a quartet played an old standard as if it had signed an NDA. At a table near the stage, Olivia adjusted the bracelet Mark had given her for an anniversary. The machine made weight of it, the way it called attention to her pulse. She didn't know yet why the room felt like the moment before weather changes. She didn't know yet that the city would, with its usual theatrical timing, make them adjacent again. She only knew that the glass, for the first time in a long time, looked less like protection and more like distance. "Ready?" Mark asked, his voice smooth as poured water. She nodded without trusting the parts of her that could nod for the wrong reasons. In the wings, Ethan cleared his throat, felt his phone thrum a little life into his pocket. Slack pings, calendar alerts, a text from a driver about a detour on the FDR. He put the phone on Do Not Disturb and stepped into light. The city, which keeps score in silence, turned a page. The night of the gala left an aftertaste Olivia couldn't name, something between nostalgia and caffeine. The chandeliers had gone out hours ago, but the glow stayed under her skin. She lay in bed beside Mark, who was already asleep, the rise and fall of his chest steady as a metronome. The air smelled faintly of the hotel's bleach and roses, of money that had never known hunger. She scrolled through her phone in the dark, thumb flicking like a habit she didn't remember forming. The photos were already online. Press shots, influencer tags, LinkedIn posts written by people who could make anything sound like an achievement. So proud to attend the Urban Sustainability Gala with leaders reshaping the city we love. Her face appeared in one image, half turned, caught in a moment she didn't authorize. In the background, a man on stage leaned toward the mic. Ethan. She clicked the tag. It took her to a clip uploaded by someone from the audience. The video began with applause. Ethan stood at the podium, sleeves rolled up, voice calm but precise. "When I started ArcPath," he said, "the goal wasn't disruption, it was repair. Cities break in quiet ways. The goal is to listen where they crack." He paused. The crowd, wine-heavy and polite, leaned in. Every delivery route, every mile we save, every driver who gets home earlier, it's not about efficiency. It's about time, the only luxury no one can scale. There was a hum after that, recognition disguised as approval. Olivia watched him lower his gaze, the way he did when he was trying not to sound emotional. It hit her like an echo she'd been avoiding for years. She closed her phone. The screen dimmed, but the feeling didn't. Ethan, meanwhile, couldn't sleep either. The hotel room overlooked the East River, the glass turning every bridge into an idea. He poured himself a drink he didn't finish and checked his phone despite Meg's advice to never read comments after midnight. There were dozens. Praise, questions, investors reaching out, a few sarcastic memes about founder messiah syndrome. And then, buried, between emojis and hashtags, a simple like, from an account he recognized instantly. Olivia Hart Ellison. He froze, then smiled, then hated that he smiled. For years, they'd orbited each other through the algorithms, LinkedIn updates, mutual friends' stories, suggested follows that felt like the internet's way of gossiping. But she had never interacted, never even viewed his posts visibly. Tonight she'd slipped. Or maybe she hadn't. Maybe it was intentional, a digital version of clearing one's throat in a crowded room. He didn't reply, of course. There was nothing to reply to, just a pixel heartbeat from another life. 2 weeks later, Olivia sat in her office in Stamford, staging another open house. The property, 5 bedrooms, glass walls, a pool designed to look like a mirror, belonged to a couple moving to Florida for tax reasons. She'd spent the morning making the place look lived in by ghosts, fresh-cut hydrangeas, coffee mugs strategically placed, jazz low enough to feel like oxygen. Her assistant called out from the foyer, "The buyers are early!" Olivia straightened her blazer, adjusted her smile, and moved into position. Her reflection in the glass door startled her. It looked competent, calm, and utterly unreachable. The couple arrived, perfect in their curated casualness. They complimented the view, asked about school ratings, spoke in the tone of people who had never doubted they could own space. Olivia answered with warmth, precision, and the detachment of someone watching herself perform. When they left, she sank onto the velvet couch, shoes off, silence expanding around her like a tide. She checked her phone out of reflex, and there it was again, a notification. Ethan had posted something new, a photo of a truck depot at dawn. Caption, "Building something takes time. Sometimes it takes leaving something behind." The comment section flooded with platitudes. Olivia stared at the words until they blurred. The phrasing was neutral, harmless, but she knew the rhythm of his sentences. She knew how his tone always held back one syllable of truth. "God," she whispered, "you're still writing to ghosts." Ethan's team noticed his distraction. "Everything okay?" Meg asked, leaning on his office doorframe with a coffee in hand. "Fine, Mutt," he said, not looking up from the spreadsheet. "You've been staring at the same cell for 5 minutes. Either you've achieved enlightenment, or you're thinking about someone you shouldn't text." He chuckled. "You sound like my therapist." "Your therapist charges by the hour. I charge in sarcasm." She paused, watching him more closely. "Look, Ethan, whatever it is, don't let nostalgia dress up as purpose. It's a bad look on founders." He wanted to argue, but she was right. Still, that night, he found himself opening the old folder on his drive titled ArcPath Origin. Inside were sketches, invoices, early emails, and one subfolder named Personal. He hesitated, then clicked. Dozens of photos. Their old apartment. Olivia laughing beside a half-built prototype, ramen on a chipped bowl. He scrolled until he couldn't. Then he selected them all, dragged them to trash, and stopped just before confirming delete. Instead, he renamed the folder Proof of Life. In the months that followed, their digital shadows began to overlap again. Olivia's agency partnered with a sustainability nonprofit, one of ArcPath's clients. Her inbox filled with corporate newsletters that carried Ethan's signature at the bottom. Every time she saw Ethan Cole, CEO, ArcPath Systems, her heart skipped like a record. At dinner one night, Mark mentioned his firm's new logistics contract. "ArcPath's pushing into grocery supply chains, he said. "Impressive margins, but their labor compliance is fuzzy." Olivia's fork stopped midair. "What do you mean, fuzzy?" "Nothing illegal, just gray areas, contractors versus employees, union whispers. It's a mess. Their CEO's a golden boy now, but give it a year. Media will find something." He smirked. "That's what happens when idealists scale." She smiled faintly, hiding the tremor in her hand. Maybe idealism's the only reason anything gets built at all. Mark raised an eyebrow. "Don't tell me you're defending him." "I'm defending the idea," she said. "That's all." He shrugged, turning back to his wine. "Ideas don't keep lights on." She thought of a radiator coughing in a small Queens apartment, of cold ramen eaten with hope instead of bitterness. Later that night, when Mark was asleep, Olivia scrolled through her contacts and hovered over a familiar name, one she'd never deleted. She typed a message, erased it, then typed again. Saw your talk at the gala. You've changed. She didn't send it. Instead, she turned off her phone and lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the pulse of everything unsaid. Meanwhile, Ethan's world grew louder. Investors called. City officials praised. A union rep threatened strikes. Journalists requested quotes. Amid the chaos, he caught himself searching for her name in the blur, on LinkedIn attendee lists, on corporate rosters, in the back of his mind where quiet things lived. He told himself it was curiosity. Closure, maybe. But every time her face appeared in his imagination, it wasn't the woman from the gala. It was the girl standing in that narrow apartment doorway, saying she couldn't be poor forever. He wondered if she ever realized he had become rich in all the wrong ways. Weeks later, a notification broke his focus mid-meeting. Incoming email. Subject: Event sponsorship inquiry. Ellison Real Estate Group. Meg read over his shoulder. That's Mark Ellison, right? Husband of... Ethan's jaw tightened. Yeah. Meg exhaled slowly. Well, the city's smaller than it looks. He clicked open the message. Light. Corporate phrasing. All business. But buried in the CC line was a name he hadn't seen in years. Olivia Hart at ellisonrealty.com. He stared at it until the text lost shape. Then, without meaning to, he smiled. Schedule a meeting, he said quietly. Meg hesitated. You sure? Yes, Ethan said. Let's see what time looks like when it circles back. Outside, Manhattan's glass towers glinted like mirrors. Somewhere beyond them, two lives began orbiting closer again. One step, one email, one unspoken memory at a time. The city didn't notice, but it always remembers. Manhattan had always been both wound and cure for Olivia. Every time she crossed the Triborough Bridge, she felt like she was entering the scene of a crime where the body was never found. Only traces, a song on a cafe speaker, a face in a crowd that almost was his. But this time, she wasn't coming as a ghost. She was coming on business. The Ellison Group had recently acquired a development project in Lower Manhattan, a renovation of historic warehouses into mixed-use green spaces, a PR dream, a tax miracle, and as fate would have it, one of ArcPath's contracted logistics partners. Mark, ever the strategist, suggested that Olivia represent the firm in preliminary sponsor meetings. Cole's company handles the sustainability component, he'd said over breakfast, barely looking up from his tablet. You're good with people. Besides, he probably won't even be there. CEOs don't come to kick off meetings. Olivia had smiled, buttering her toast with more control than she felt. Right, just logistics. Now, sitting in the back of the black Lincoln weaving through Soho, she couldn't ignore the irony. Every street corner seemed to hum with his name. ArcPath banners fluttered on lampposts, reimagining urban flow. She thought about turning around, calling in sick, inventing a migraine, but something deeper, curiosity, guilt, or that old unsurrendered love, anchored her in the seat. The car stopped before a building she recognized from a news feature, ArcPath headquarters. Brick bones from a past century, glass skin from this one. She stood on the curb, exhaled, and walked in. The lobby was bright, efficient, and alive. Digital dashboards pulsed with real-time route data. Employees in jeans and headphones moved like synchronized atoms. She signed in, ignoring the tremor in her hand. Mr. Cole will see you shortly, said the receptionist. Olivia's heart skipped. So he was here. Ethan saw her before she saw him. Through the glass wall of the conference room, he watched her step out of the elevator. Tailored suit, hair pinned up, eyes scanning the space like a detective who didn't want to find evidence. Time had changed her edges, not her gravity. The sight hit him with a violence he hadn't rehearsed for. Meg, seated beside him, noticed the shift in his face. "You okay?" He nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just déjà vu." When Olivia entered, professionalism wrapped around her like armor. "Mr. Cole," she said, extending a hand, "it's been a while." "Ethan, please," he said, standing. "Welcome to ArcPath." Their handshake was brief but electric, the kind that remembers more than it should. For a second, silence held the room hostage. Then business resumed. Meg started the presentation: slides on emission reduction, micro-hub coordination, partnership logistics. Ethan added notes when needed, his tone measured, his gaze anywhere but her face. Olivia took notes she'd never read again. Still, there were moments, accidental glances, mirrored movements, that made the air pulse. When the meeting ended, Meg gathered her laptop. "I'll leave you two to discuss next steps." Ethan shot her a look that said, "Don't you dare." Meg smiled sweetly and left anyway. The door clicked shut. They stood there, both pretending to study the city view outside. "I didn't expect you'd still be in New York," Ethan said finally. "I didn't expect you'd still want to save it," she replied, half smile, half defense. He turned toward her. "Someone has to." Her laugh was soft, brittle. "You always did think in causes, and you always thought in exits." The word slipped out sharper than he meant. She flinched. He exhaled. "Sorry, that wasn't fair." "No," she said quietly. "It was." She walked closer to the window. Outside, traffic streamed like veins of light. "You did it, Ethan. Everything you said you would. I saw your interview on CNBC. You sounded different, older, maybe a little sad." "Success ages you faster than failure," he said. "Failure gives you time to dream. Success just gives you deadlines." "That sounds lonely." He looked at her. "It is." Silence again. Not hostile, but full, like the moment before rain. "I heard about your husband," he said carefully. "Ellison Group's impressive." "He's efficient," she cut in. "Mark's good at winning. He collects results the way other men collect art." Ethan hesitated. "And you?" "I curate appearances," she said with a bitter grace. "We're a perfect exhibit." Something in his chest tightened. "Why are you here, Liv?" She turned to him fully now, eyes clear, voice steady. "Because time circled back, and I wanted to see if I still recognized the man I left." "And?" "I do," she said, "but he looks like someone who stopped believing in love somewhere along the climb." He wanted to deny it, but the truth was already there, standing in the same room. "Maybe I just stopped believing love should hurt," he said. Her gaze softened. "Love didn't hurt us, Ethan. Pride did." The words landed between them like a confession neither had the right to make. Outside, the city exhaled. Horns, footsteps, distant sirens, all the ways it reminds you that you're small. Ethan reached for his phone, pretending to check a message just to break the tension. "There's a gala next month. The city's hosting a Clean Energy Award. You'll probably be invited through your firm." "I know," she said. "Mark's on the guest list." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll see you there." She smiled faintly. Careful. The last gala didn't end quietly. He smiled back, the first real smile in years. Nothing between us ever did. That night, Olivia stood on her balcony overlooking the quiet Connecticut cul-de-sac, glass of wine untouched in her hand. Mark was on another work call inside, discussing quarterly returns. She opened her laptop, hesitated, then searched ArcPath systems. The first headline read, "Inside the Startup, Turning City Chaos into Clean Order." Ethan's photo filled the screen. Confident, tired, human. She traced his name with her eyes and whispered, "What would we have been if we'd waited one more year?" The answer didn't come. In a different skyline, Ethan sat alone in his office long after the team had gone. Outside, the Hudson shimmered like a question he couldn't answer. He opened an old draft of his first pitch deck and stared at the tagline Olivia had once written for him on a napkin: "Build roads that lead people home." He read it 3 times. Then he closed the file without saving. For the first time in years, he didn't feel victorious. He just felt seen. And somewhere across the river, Olivia, awake, restless, and staring into her own reflection, felt the same. The city didn't need to conspire. It already knew. Some stories never end. They just find new intersections. The morning news broke like glass. Ethan's phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Emails, mentions, texts, Slack pings. Somewhere between caffeine and panic, he opened the first headline. ArcPath accused of labor violations in contract fleet. Anonymous sources allege underpaid couriers and falsified compliance reports. City opens inquiry. He read it twice, the words turning to static. Outside his office window, Manhattan gleamed as if nothing had happened. Inside, ArcPath, the company he'd built from ramen fumes and insomnia, was being dismantled by pixels. Meg barged in without knocking, a coffee in one hand and fury in the other. "It's coordinated," she said. "The article cites internal audits that don't exist, screenshots cropped out of context, and quotes from former employees who all use brand new Twitter accounts. This is a hit job." "Who benefits?" Ethan asked, voice low, even. "Guess." He didn't need to. Mark Ellison's name hovered behind every syllable like a watermark. By noon, the company's Slack had turned into a rumor factory. Reporters were camped in the lobby. Drivers were posting TikToks defending ArcPath, while unions called for clarity. Investors wanted answers, statements, damage control. Meg slid him a folder. "Legal says stay silent. PR says deny. I say, tell the truth," Ethan finished. She looked at him carefully. "The truth doesn't trend as fast." He leaned back in his chair, exhaustion drawing lines across his face. "It's not about trending. It's about surviving the mirror." For a moment, Meg softened. "You know this isn't just business, right? Someone's making it personal." He gave her a thin smile. "Everything's personal when success reminds people of their compromises." Across the river, Olivia scrolled through her phone at her office, stomach tightening at the sight of his name splashed across every feed. The article was everywhere, shared by coworkers, dissected by industry blogs, whispered over takeout lunches. She should have ignored it. Instead, she opened every version. Anonymous sources close to the company allege ArcPath pressured subcontractors to falsify worker hours. The founder, Ethan Cole, has yet to comment. Insiders question whether the poster child of ethical logistics can survive the storm. She knew spin when she saw it. The phrasing was too neat, the leak too timed. Ellison Group's PR division had fingerprints all over it. When she called Mark, he didn't even feign surprise. "Damage control," he said flatly. "ArcPath was overvalued. Investors wanted transparency. Someone pushed." "Someone like you?" A pause. Then, "Liv, this is how the system cleans itself." Her voice trembled. "You mean how it devours anyone who didn't start rich enough to be untouchable?" "Ethan's not a saint," he said. "If his house can't survive a little wind, maybe it wasn't built right." She hung up before she said something she couldn't retract. That evening, she sat in her car outside ArcPath headquarters, watching through tinted glass as employees streamed out. Some angry, some anxious, all uncertain. She knew she shouldn't be there. But worry is its own kind of gravity. When the crowd thinned, she saw him. Ethan stepped outside, suit jacket unbuttoned, tie loose, the weight of public scrutiny clinging to his shoulders. He looked up at the skyline, as though expecting it to apologize. Olivia got out of the car. He turned, surprise flickering into something like relief. "You shouldn't be here." "I know." "Then why?" "Because I couldn't not be." They stood under the awning, wind lifting her hair, sirens echoing from somewhere uptown. "I read the articles," she said. "It's a setup." "Yeah," he said, bitter laugh. "And the city loves a setup. Nothing tastes better than a fallen idealist." "I can help," she said quickly. "Ellison Group's PR team. If I can get access to their draft logs, maybe—" He stopped her. "Liv, don't. It's not your fight." "It is," she whispered. "You just don't know it." He looked at her, truly looked, for the first time since that first meeting. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying," she said slowly, "that Mark's firm has every reason to sink you, and I might be able to prove it." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You'd risk your job? Your marriage?" She met his gaze. Both were built on half-truths anyway. The words lingered between them, reckless, true, alive. Later that night, Olivia drove home to Connecticut, headlights carving through the dark. The house glowed like a photograph. Mark pacing by the window, phone in hand. He didn't wait for her to speak. "You went to see him?" She froze. "How do you—" "Traffic cams," he said coolly. "Don't look so shocked. This is the world we live in." "Then you already know he's innocent." "I know he's convenient," Mark said, stepping closer. "You're defending him because you still see yourself in his failure." "But you've outgrown that. We have a life here. Don't ruin it for nostalgia." Olivia's voice cracked. "This isn't nostalgia. This is conscience." "Conscience doesn't pay the mortgage," he snapped. "Maybe that's the problem," she said. At midnight, she opened her laptop in the guest room and accessed Ellison Group's internal press archive. Her credentials still worked. Within minutes, she found it, a draft memo titled ArcPath Inquiry, Controlled Narrative. Attached were timelines, planned leaks, and talking points that matched the headlines verbatim. Her hands shook. She saved everything to a drive. Then she paused, staring at the reflection of herself on the dark screen. Somewhere in that reflection was the woman who'd once left a man for being too poor. Now she was rich in silence, poor in peace. She sent the files to a private email address she still remembered, ethan.arcpath@gmail.com. No subject, no message, just the truth. At 2:17 a.m., Ethan's phone buzzed. He opened the attachment, read every word, and felt something inside him unclench and then collapse. He called her. She answered on the first ring. "Liv," he whispered, "you didn't have to. I did." For a moment, neither spoke. The city outside was all hum and heartbeat. "What will you do?" she asked. "Tell the truth," he said again, "even if no one listens." "Someone will," she said softly. "I will." He closed his eyes, breathing her name like a prayer. "You could lose everything. So could you." He smiled into the phone. "Then maybe we'll finally be even." The next morning, the New York Ledger published an anonymous leak exposing the smear campaign. Ellison Group's PR director resigned. Mark's name surfaced in the internal memo. By noon, he was under review. Ethan's statement went live hours later. "ArcPath has nothing to hide. Our work began in transparency. It will end there if it must. No system survives if its success depends on silence." The city watched, refreshed, reacted. Olivia watched too, from her office, from her car, from every screen, and for the first time in years, she cried not from guilt, but from something close to pride. That night, she stood by the window, suitcase open on the bed behind her. Mark was gone, or pretending to be. The sky over Connecticut was clear, the stars sharp enough to cut. She whispered into the glass, "You were right, Ethan. The only luxury no one can scale is time. And somewhere across the river, Ethan stood on his balcony, the same words echoing in his head, carried by a wind that smelled faintly of redemption. The storm had passed, but its cost was still being counted. Because success, he realized, doesn't come free. It always arrives with a bill written in human currency. And sometimes, the price is everything you thought you wanted. The city was still trembling from the fallout. Every morning headline felt like an aftershock. Mark Ellison under investigation. ArcPath cleared of wrongdoing. Investors cautiously returning. But to Ethan, it all sounded like static. The war was over, yet the silence afterward felt heavier than the noise. He found himself avoiding his own reflection. Not just in the literal sense, mirrors, windows, elevator doors, but in the figurative one too. The reflection of who he had become while climbing out of the ruin Olivia once left him in. Success had sharpened him, polished him, stripped away softness. Now that the dust had settled, he wasn't sure what was left. When Olivia called that evening, her voice was steady, almost businesslike. "Meet me," she said, "somewhere quiet, somewhere no one performs." He knew exactly where. They met near midnight on the Hudson River Greenway, a stretch of water and wind where the city's insomnia came to breathe. It was cold enough to make words visible. Ethan arrived first, hands in his coat pockets, eyes on the skyline. The city shimmered, towers reflecting towers, light pretending to be peace. When Olivia appeared, her heels clicked softly against the pavement before she stopped beside him. "Do you always pick cinematic places for real conversations?" she asked, half a smile in her voice. "Only when the truth needs scenery," he said. They stood in silence for a while, letting the water talk for them. Ferries cut through the dark like moving scars. Somewhere across the river, Jersey glowed faintly, an audience to their unfinished play. "You didn't have to save me?" Ethan said finally. "I didn't," she answered. "I saved the version of you I destroyed." He turned to her. "That's poetic. Dangerous, too. I'm tired of safety." Her breath fogged between them. He could see the tremor in her fingers, could hear the undertow in her voice, the exhaustion of someone who'd been living behind glass for too long. "I left Mark," she said simply. Ethan blinked. "When?" "This morning. I didn't take the car, or the jewelry, or the house. Just my passport, my laptop, and peace." He wanted to say something. "I'm sorry," or "You're brave," or even "I understand," but nothing fit. Instead, he took off his gloves and handed them to her. "You'll freeze." She accepted them, slipping them on slowly. "Do you ever think about how our lives turned into statements?" "What do you mean?" "You're Ethan Cole, founder of ArcPath, and I'm Olivia Hart Ellison, the wife who left. Every time our names appear, they come with footnotes. I miss being people without explanations." He nodded. "Yeah, before the narratives." "Before the audience," she added. They started walking along the river, matching pace unconsciously. The path was nearly empty, except for a few runners and the hum of distant traffic. "I thought success would make things make sense," he said. "That once I proved I wasn't who you thought I was, it would close the loop." "Did it?" "No, it just opened another one." He laughed softly. "Turns out proving someone wrong doesn't heal anything. It just changes the scoreboard." Olivia looked at him carefully. "And proving someone right?" He frowned. "Right about what?" "That you were always going to matter," she said. For a moment he couldn't breathe. The honesty in her voice was too naked, too familiar. He looked at the river instead. "You said something once about not wanting to be poor forever." She closed her eyes briefly. "I remember. I thought you meant money." "I did, but not just that. I was scared of scarcity, of time, hope, patience.
I thought if I left first, I'd escape the emptiness, but it just followed me into bigger rooms. He studied her face, the small lines of regret near her mouth, the tired beauty that age had refined rather than erased. You were 25, Liv. We were both building castles out of promises. Maybe, she said, but yours survived. He shook his head. No, I just learned to decorate the ruins. They reached Pier 46, where the river opened into a wide stretch of darkness. She stopped, leaning against the railing. Do you ever wish, she asked quietly, that we'd met later, when we knew who we were? He smiled sadly. Then we wouldn't have loved like that. We'd have been careful. She laughed, a sound fragile and luminous. And boring. He turned toward her. Exactly. The air between them shifted. Not romantic, not nostalgic. Something deeper. Two survivors standing over the same wreckage, finally able to name it. I have to ask, she said after a while. If I hadn't sent you those files, if the truth hadn't come out, would you have forgiven me? He thought for a long moment. I don't know if forgiveness is something you decide. Sometimes it just shows up one day and refuses to leave. Her eyes shimmered. Then maybe tonight it showed up. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His fingers hesitated halfway down, hovering near her jaw. She didn't move. For
one impossible second, time folded. They were back in Queens. The radiator coughing, ramen boiling, both of them too young to understand how easily love can starve. Then the moment passed. Ethan stepped back. You should rest, he said softly. Start wherever you need to. No headlines this time. She smiled faintly. And you? I'll keep building, he said, but slower now, maybe for the right reasons. They began walking again, side by side, until the city swallowed them back into its rhythm. At the corner, a cab slowed for her. She opened the door, then turned back. Ethan? Yeah? You were never too poor, she said. You were just too early. He stood there, hands in his pockets, watching her drive away. The night wind swept across the river, carrying the scent of cold and salt, and something like forgiveness. Hours later, in his apartment overlooking the skyline, Ethan sat by the window with a notebook. He hadn't written anything by hand in years. On the first page, he wrote, "Success is not the opposite of loss. It's just what comes after you learn to live with it." Then he closed the notebook, exhaled, and for the first time in years, slept without ambition. Across the city, in a small rented flat on the Upper West Side, Olivia unpacked a single suitcase. No jewelry, no designer gowns, just clothes that fit her, not her image. She set her phone face down and opened the window. The air smelled of rain and river. In the distance, a siren wailed like memory. She whispered into the dark, "Good night, Ethan." And though neither of them knew it, he whispered the same. The city, ever eavesdropping, held both confessions in its pulse. Morning in New York arrived like a verdict, gray, restless, full of unfinished sentences. The scandal had quieted, but its echo still haunted the city's glass canyons. Ethan sat in the corner booth of a Lower East Side cafe, fingers curled around a mug gone cold, rereading the email from his PR team for the 10th time. Subject: Damage Control. Phase 3: Counterstatement Proposal. We've drafted a piece exposing Ellison Group's internal manipulation. It'll redirect narrative blame toward Mark. Guaranteed traction. We just need your approval to release. Meg slid into the seat across from him, coat still wet from rain. They want blood, she said simply. I noticed. You could clear your name completely. The city loves a redemption arc. Ethan looked out the window. Delivery bikes splashed through puddles. A woman argued with a cab driver in the universal language of impatience. Life was moving on,
indifferent. I'm done weaponizing the truth, he said. It's already cost too much. Meg studied him. You're not going to publish it? He shook his head. No, I'm not saving ArcPath by destroying someone else, even Mark. Meg exhaled, half in disbelief, half in admiration. You realize that's suicide in PR terms? He
smiled faintly. Then we'll die honest. She leaned back. You've changed, Cole. No, he said. I just stopped confusing victory with meaning. That afternoon, Ethan called an all-hands meeting at ArcPath. The office, though newly calm, still smelled faintly of anxiety. His team, developers, dispatchers, planners, filled the open space, whispering, waiting. He stood before them without a script. I started this company with the idea that systems could be human, he began, that data could be empathy in disguise. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. Murmurs quieted, every eye on him. We've been measuring success by growth charts, by contracts, by headlines. But the real metric isn't what we deliver. It's who we become while delivering it. So from today forward, we're restructuring. Fewer clients, more fairness, better pay for our drivers, no ghost shifts, no subcontracting fog. He paused. If that means smaller profits, fine. If that means slower growth, better. Silence. Then, unexpectedly, applause. Hesitant at first, then genuine, then thunderous. Meg wiped at her eye discreetly. You sentimental bastard, she whispered. Ethan smiled. For the first time in years, he felt clean. Meanwhile, across town, Olivia was beginning again. She had rented a small studio on West 89th, 2 blocks from the river, with uneven floors and a stubborn radiator. Ironically, it sounded almost like the one she'd left behind in Queens. Each creak felt like an echo of the life she'd once wanted, before ambition had turned love into a transaction. Her days were quiet now. She freelanced as a consultant for small real estate startups, wrote long emails to clients herself instead of delegating them, walked to Riverside Park with a thermos of coffee. Some evenings, she taught yoga classes to overworked professionals who mistook stillness for failure. Freedom, she discovered, didn't shout. It whispered. One night, scrolling absent-mindedly through local news, she saw Ethan again, standing at a podium in front of City Hall, announcing ArcPath's human logistics reform. The headline read, CEO rejects retaliation, pledges transparency over triumph. There was a clip. She pressed play. We built roads to move things faster, Ethan said to the crowd. Now we're building roads that last longer, roads made of trust. Her throat tightened. She didn't cry this time. She smiled, small and proud. 2 weeks later, their paths crossed again, by accident, or maybe by inevitability. It was a Saturday morning, unseasonably warm. Olivia was browsing produce at the Union Square Farmers Market when she heard someone say her name. Olivia? She turned. Ethan stood there, casual in jeans and a black jacket, holding a paper cup of coffee and a bundle of kale. He looked lighter, not in weight, but in burden. I thought you hated mornings, she said, smiling. I did, he said, but they're quieter than nights now. They walked together through the rows of stalls, surrounded by the scent of basil and bread, the sound of city life unedited. I read your speech, she said. You did the right thing. He shrugged. It doesn't feel heroic, just necessary. That's what makes it heroic. They stopped by a stand selling wildflowers. A woman offered them a bouquet. Olivia hesitated, then chose one wrapped in brown paper, yellow tulips. They used to grow outside our window, Ethan said quietly. She nodded. I know. He reached for his wallet. Let me... She stopped him with a look. You paid enough for that memory. They laughed softly,
the kind of laughter that forgives without permission. As they left the market, they paused by a bench facing the park. "I've been thinking," Ethan said. "Maybe I was wrong about success." "How so?" "I used to think it meant proving something. Now I think it's just having peace with what you've lost." Olivia watched the city breathing around them. Joggers, vendors, sunlight bouncing off glass. "Then maybe we're both successful." He smiled. "Maybe." They sat in silence, not as ex-lovers, not as victims of each other's ambition, but as two people who'd finally stopped running from the mirror. When her phone buzzed, she glanced at it briefly. A message from a new client. A fresh start. She turned it face down. "I should go," she said. "Yeah," he answered. "So should I." They stood, awkward for a heartbeat. Then she leaned in and kissed his cheek, soft and deliberate. "For what it's worth," she said, "I don't regret leaving. I regret why I did." He met her eyes. "And I don't regret forgiving you. I regret how long it took." She smiled. "We're learning." "Slow learners," he said. "The best kind," she replied, and walked away. Ethan watched her fade into the crowd, sunlight threading through her hair. He didn't chase her this time. He didn't need to. He turned back toward the street, coffee cooling in his hand, and felt something rare. Contentment unperformed. That night, he updated ArcPath's mission statement. It was no longer about disruption or innovation. It was just one line. "We build systems that make people visible again." He hit save, turned off the screen, and let the dark feel honest. In another part of the city, Olivia placed the bouquet of tulips in a chipped glass by the window. She whispered, "For what was, and for what survived." The radiator hissed once, like agreement. And somewhere between them, between past and peace, the city exhaled, finally letting go. It was spring again, the kind of spring New York does reluctantly, like a city afraid of being sincere. The street smelled of thawed concrete and food carts, and the air had that soft shimmer that made even strangers look cinematic. Ethan stood outside the ArcPath headquarters, hands in pockets, watching a delivery truck with the company's new logo pull away from the curb. The design was simple now. No tagline, no corporate poetry, just a small emblem of two roads converging. "Looks clean," Meg said, stepping up beside him. "Minimalist, mature, like a man who's finally stopped proving he's over his ex." He smiled. "Careful. I might start charging you for therapy." She grinned, then her tone softened. "You did good, Ethan. The city notices. Quietly, but it does." He nodded, eyes on the street. "That's enough." "Taking a break?" "Taking a breath," he said. Meg studied him for a moment, then walked back inside, leaving him with the hum of traffic and the whisper of something new. Peace, maybe, disguised as boredom. Olivia's life had settled into rhythm, not spectacle. Mornings began with sunlight spilling through curtains she chose herself. She worked from a small co-working space near Central Park, helping small businesses find footing without selling their souls. Her desk was always messy. Coffee rings, handwritten notes, wildflowers. Some nights, she walked to the Hudson just to listen to the river breathe. It was a quieter version of the one where she and Ethan had met weeks before. Less cinematic, more honest. She hadn't spoken to him since the farmer's market. There'd been no need. Their story, finally, had punctuation. But sometimes, between emails, in taxi windows, in the pause before sleep, she'd think of him, not with ache, but with a kind of grateful curiosity. What was he building now? Was he sleeping better? Was he happy? She didn't look him up. Some people you love by letting their absence mean something good. Months passed. Summer came with the weightless cruelty of heat and headlines. The city moved on. New scandals, new startups, new heroes. ArcPath kept its head down and did the work. Then one morning, the New York Ledger published a short column buried on page 10, a small revolution in urban logistics. While many companies chase valuation, ArcPath has quietly restructured into a worker-owned cooperative. Founder Ethan Cole announced he's stepping down as CEO, effective immediately. "It's time the people who built the system owned it," he said in a brief statement. Olivia read it twice. Then she smiled. The kind of smile that starts in the chest and ends in the eyes. She whispered to no one, "You finally arrived." That evening, she went for a walk along the river. The city's light reflected like scattered promises on the water. Near Pier 46, she saw someone sitting on the same bench where they had stood that night months ago. It was him. Ethan looked up, surprised, then smiled. "You found me again." "I didn't look," she said. "The city did." They sat side by side. No urgency this time, just two people existing in the same quiet. "I read about the cooperative," she said. He nodded. It felt right. Let the drivers, the dispatchers, everyone, own a piece of it. I'm just part of the story now, not the center. That sounds like freedom. "It is," he said. "Freedom with a little homesickness mixed in." She laughed softly. "That's how you know it's real." They watched the water ripple, the skyline shimmer. Somewhere behind them, a saxophone played from a rooftop bar, the sound drifting down like memory. "Do you ever think," she said, "that maybe we met too early, but learned just in time?" He considered that. "Yeah, I think love doesn't always need a sequel. Sometimes it just needs an ending that doesn't hurt." She nodded. "Or one that finally makes sense." He turned to her. "And this? Does this make sense?" She smiled. "It does now." They sat there as the sun slid lower, neither reaching for the other, neither pulling away. What they shared wasn't a rekindling, it was recognition. The kind you carry quietly for the rest of your life. When Olivia stood to leave, Ethan stayed seated. "Goodbye, Liv," he said, not as loss, but as blessing. "Goodbye, Ethan," she answered, her voice steady, her eyes bright. "And thank you." "For what?" "For keeping your promise," she said. "You became someone you wouldn't leave." He looked up at her and smiled, a small, almost secret smile that said everything words couldn't. Later that night, Ethan walked the empty streets alone. The city hummed around him, electric and endless. He stopped at a corner bodega, bought a coffee, and handed $1 to the delivery biker resting on the curb. "Long night?" Ethan asked. The man shrugged. "Always is." Ethan smiled. "Yeah, but it's worth it." He looked up at the skyline, his skyline, and realized he no longer felt like he was looking up. He was simply in it, part of its pulse, its imperfection, its grace. The billboard across the street flickered briefly. ArcPath, moving people forward. He almost laughed. For once, it wasn't about him. And somewhere uptown, Olivia opened her window to let in the night air. A faint breeze carried the scent of rain, the same scent from a life long gone, but never wasted. She whispered into the dark, "You were right. The only luxury no one can scale is time." The city listened, like it always did, and whispered back in lights, "You found it."